You're listening to SOUHAN Unfiltered with your host, Jim Souhan. I'm Sean Bernard at the Southside Studios. Jim Souhan is in Phoenix at the Super Bowl. How you doing, Jim?
If they played it right now outside, it would be the Fog Bowl 2, or maybe the Fog Bowl 1, because I've never seen fog. I haven't seen fog like this since maybe, back in my baseball writing days when I spent some time in San Francisco and get up early in the morning. I can't see the building next to us. It's amazing. It's been a really weird weather week, and the locals tell me that all the travel guys will tell you that it's sunny 12 months down here. They tell me this is definitely the rainy season. It has been rainy or cloudy or cool the entire week. That's really odd weather for Phoenix. As I told you the other day, I grew up there, and I don't remember many foggy mornings there. No, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. And I know that the locals really like it when they have the stadium open on game day. I would think that this might be an indication they're going to be closing that joint up. Well, yeah, I imagine they have the grass. So the grass actually, the field goes outside or inside, and they can actually roll it out to the outdoors too, right? Yeah, they can do that. Yeah. But they'd like, the NFL they like pristine conditions. So I think we'll be looking at a closed venue today. Yeah, I was going to say they'll want to keep it nice and dry all day long today, and then play the game tonight. What time is the game tonight? About 5:20? Is that usually right? It's Central about 5:30 your time, 4:30 in Phoenix. Yep. Great. So where do you want to get started? Maybe with a little talk of Mick Tingelhoff finally making the Hall of Fame? Let's start there because I have a lot to say about that one. Great. First of all, there aren't many players who, if you want to use the word deserve, I usually don't use the word deserve in sports. I think it's used way too much in sports. But if you want to use the word deserve, I think Mick probably is one of the people who is qualified to have that word in his sentence about him earning an achievement. He just was a relentless player. He just played and played and played at a really tough position, played with a lot of injuries, played on really good teams, he was one of the hallmarks of dependency on a team that was pretty dependable. So I'm glad to see him get in. 240 games without missing a practice or a game is remarkable. It's just stunning. In that sport, it's stunning. Now that being said, it's really hard to figure out who should be in the Football Hall of Fame. It's really hard. And I've been in the room during voting before. One time, I don't know, I think it was maybe in Miami. Sid couldn't make it. Sid, for a long time, was on the voting panel, which is basically a bunch of veteran football writers, and I think now it's open to a couple other media as well. And it's kind of a crusty old group. They sit there and they break things down. They all give presentations on the player or a coach or a person they're most closely affiliated with. So when I did it, I did Carl Eller. And, I don't know how many Viking fans realize this, and that's why I'm going to talk about it. So I get up during that meeting, and I give my presentation of Carl Eller. And I did the way everybody does it. I looked at statistics. I looked for comparables. I interviewed people who knew him. I interviewed people who would support his candidacy. And I presented it the way you kind of present a story, And I can't tell you how little response I got from people in the room. They kind of looked at me, and they looked at the next guy and just moved on. They acted like I wasn't there. And a lot of these guys are friends of mine and people I know really well because I was a football writer at the time. Yeah. And so the Vikings went a long time without having people inducted in the Hall of Fame. They went a long time with very good candidates not making it in, like Carl Eller. Carl went a long time. And what I came to realize after talking to people on the panel was that Sid Hartman, everybody's Minnesota sports hero, the guy who champions the local guy above all else, the guy who kisses up to every local athlete, regardless of logic, was damaging the candidacy of all these people because he would go in that room and he would scream at them and call them names. I'm not kidding. I know, but you assholes, So, he would go there, you bunch of assholes, you don't know anything about football, you got to put this guy in the Hall of Fame. It should be all Vikings, okay? The whole damn place should be painted purple. So here's Sid screaming at these people, and they're meeting people. They got they're a little reactive, So Sid would scream at them, and then Sid would damage his own candidate by trying to present a different candidate. So if he was presenting, if it was his job to present Carl Eller, he'd get up there and basically say, "You assholes should put Carl Eller in the Hall of Fame, okay?" And then he'd say, "But you should really put Mick Tingelhoff in the Hall of Fame, okay? You asshole." And so he didn't get anybody, he got no borderline candidates in the Hall of Fame when he was presenting for Minnesota athletes.
You got to wonder if there was a time where Mick Tingelhoff or Carl Eller said, "Hey, Sid, you're not helping."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Sid, thanks for the help, but you're
Get
not
off
helping.
my team, okay?
Well, but here's the thing. It used to be a closed room. Now they actually broadcast some of the speeches, and they have a camera in the room, which is a really weird development. Back in those days, it was a closed room. If you weren't in the room, you had no idea what was going on in the room unless you had friends in there like I did. So Sid for years damaged the candidacy of all these guys. While he was going on the radio back in Minnesota and telling them what a great job he was doing promoting their causes, right? So at some point, travel becomes more difficult for Sid. And while I needle Sid about a lot of things, I don't needle him about his longevity and his work ethic. He is an amazing survivor, and he is an amazing physical specimen to still be working at this age. But at some point, the travel got to be a bit much.
And he's noted as the state treasurer and also the state pain in the ass sometimes.
Yes. So at some point, Mark Craig, a veteran NFL writer, he covered the Browns before he came to Minnesota. He's been covering the Vikings. He came to Minnesota to cover the Gophers, but a little time with Glenn Mason chased him to the NFL. And he's been covering the NFL and the Vikings ever since. And Mark is a very good guy, very good on perspective, very good on big picture, really knows football, has a lot of connections, who he talks to about the game. So Mark replaced Sid, and guess what? All of a sudden, almost every Viking candidate starts getting in. And it's because Mark, unlike Sid, would schmooze his buddies, and not in a bad way, but he would just kind of say, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking." He would get up and give a very professional presentation, probably a better presentation than I gave, and he would not insult anybody. He would just let the candidate's story speak for itself. He would be reasonable. He's well liked in the room. All of a sudden, everybody's getting in, and now Mick Tingelhoff made it through the senior committee or whatever. But again, I think big picture, Mark Craig has done more for Viking candidates than Sid did his entire life.
Well, I loved what Fran Tarkington, or as my dad always said, Francis Asbury Tarkington said about Mick Tingelhoff. Fran said, I was more excited about Mick Tingelhoff getting into the Hall of Fame than I was about myself getting in, and I just thought that was fantastic. I mean, the guy's...
Yeah, and I think that is the way Mick is viewed by a lot of the older players. Now, I didn't cover Mick. I got to town in 1990, but certainly I came to town to cover the Vikings, so I know I've heard a lot of Mick Tingelhoff stories, and he is he was a remarkably durable and dependable player, an excellent player, and one of the uncomfortable aspects of dealing with Hall of Fame voting in any sport is, if somebody's going to get in, listen, it ain't for everybody. It ain't the Hall of very good players. It's the Hall of Fame. It's supposed to be not the best. It's supposed to be the best of the best. So there are a lot of great players who don't make it. And if all the people you thought were good made it, then all of a sudden it'd be like Disneyland. It'd be just everybody buys a ticket and walks through the doors. It's supposed to be exclusive, which means some good people are supposed to be left out. But if somebody's going to make it, you want to see them make it in while they're alive, while their beloved ones are alive, and while they have their faculties. And it's been a struggle for Mick. Daily life is not easy for him anymore, according to all the people I know who know him. So at least he made it in when I think he can appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell me, how's your week been in Phoenix? What's going on down there?
It's I got to be honest, it's been weird because like the piece I did today kind of reflected on all the weird stuff that's happened this weekend. And there's always weird stuff. I mean, 2 years ago, Ray Rice was accused of using deer antler spray, for some strange reason. And not accused, everybody knows that he used it. But, so there's always a weird sidelight, and it's always a spectacle. And, I think the average fan sees the broadcast of Media Day with all the, when they let all the frauds in to do the fake interviews and thinks that's what it's like all week. Actually, Wednesday and Thursday and Friday are more traditional, just interview days, and it's actually pretty professional and everything. Tuesdays are spectacle. But think about all the stuff that's going on here. You got the Patriots, while they're playing here, Aaron Hernandez is going through his murder trial. And Bill Belichick will be a witness eventually, and Robert Kraft will be a witness eventually, and word has gotten out over the year or last year or two, that Bill Belichick kind of knew there, and that this was capable of killing people, and still wanted him on his team. So you got that going on. You got Gronk having an erotic novel written about him and reading a passage of it at Media Day.
This is this is really odd. This is almost like Coen Brothers type of stuff or some kind
yes,
of. I mean, it's really
the erotic
odd.
novel was written by a woman in I guess New England area called A Gronking to Remember.
That's great. She turned it into a verb.
Yes, she did.
Have you ever
She did.
gronked?
Everything gets turned into a verb. Every verb gets turned into a noun, and every noun gets turned into a verb in modern America. That's the way it works.
I never gronk on the first date.
I might have not known it.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
so
you used to drink quite a bit.
And the great thing about Gronkowski is he is exactly who you think he is. He's a big, strong, incredible athlete who loves playing football and who spends all of his free time, with women and beer. I mean, he is the guy down the hall at the frat or the dorm your freshman year who you didn't think was going to make it through college because he's going to party his way out of school. Only this guy is like one of the 5 best football players in existence.
More proof that life isn't fair, right?
Well, if you want to look at it that way, yes, he does have it all going on for him. Other than a brain, I'm not sure. Let's put it this way: I don't think Gronk's going to have to worry about brain damage in the future.
So what do you want to talk about next? Do you want to talk about Kevin Love getting booed out of the stadium, or what do you want to?
Let's do a little general Minnesota sports, and
Sure.
then we'll kind of backtrack. And later on, our guest, who I taped an interview with yesterday, Art Thiel, longtime Seattle columnist, his paper folded, and he started up his own venture called Sports Press Northwest. Art's a great writer, really literate, really smart. And in the interview, he gave me. And I've been covering Seattle here and there over the years, and I covered them last year during the Super Bowl. Art told me stuff about that franchise, the key figures, and even some statistical models that I had never heard before. So that's definitely worth listening to. Right now, let's get to the Kevin Love thing. My premise on Kevin Love was that Minnesotans, if they wanted to get up and do the cliched booing of the guy who comes home, we're going to look really silly. Because, I don't think fans realize when you get up and boo somebody, you're pretty much admitting you're the jilted lover who's admitting you're still in love. If they had ignored Kevin Love, that would have been a much more powerful statement, and then it would have looked like much stronger people. Booing Kevin Love is kind of saying, we still wish you were here. And I don't think that has to be the case. Listen, Kevin Love wasn't going to help this team win. They would have won more games, but they wouldn't have gone anywhere. And Andrew Wiggins is a much better fit for what the Wolves need for the future than Kevin Love is right now. Wiggins has a great night last night. He seems to be the kind of guy who plays his best when he has a reason to play well. 2 of his best games have been against LeBron James and the Cavaliers. Kevin Love is not having a good year. He had an okay game last night. He's not having a good year. He's damaging his free agency. He's not helping that team win as much as he should win. Wolves fans should be thrilled to see Kevin Love coming home under these circumstances and having Wiggins have a big game. I'm sure they were excited about the Wiggins aspect of that, but don't boo Kevin Love. Don't give him the satisfaction.
Well, Minnesotans are bridesmaids. I mean, our sports teams, we feel like bridesmaids all the time, and that's the way it is. It's the bridesmaid that's just never a bride. We never get to actually take home the crown, at least not since 91 with the Twins. But no, I just think that you're right. People have a chip on their shoulder here, and they need to lighten up and just let him play his game and be happy with what we have right now. Although, again, people are jilted and jaded, and we want a crown. That's all we want. So,
yeah, and you know what? That leads to another philosophical discussion here, because my premise is, if all you watch sports for is so you can win a championship and feel good about that championship, well, I got 2 things there. Number one, no championships are guaranteed, and there are cities that have gone much longer than we have. I mean, it's better to be a Minnesota sports fan, even in this horrible 4-year stretch that we've had. It's better to be a Minnesota sports fan than it is to be a Cleveland sports fan. It's better to be a Minnesota sports fan. Let's see, pick another city. I'm trying to think who else. I mean,
well, you can't say Detroit because of the Red Wings. You can't go there.
Right, and now you can talk if you want to talk. And even the Tigers have gotten to the World Series.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are other places, and there's Buffalo, which your teams don't win championships, and you have to live in Buffalo. So if you're going to win, if your only reason for watching sports is to win a championship, well then you're never going to be happy. because you can't guarantee it's going to happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know if it's going to happen. And once it happens, let's be honest, the mentality of the sports fan is to ask, okay, let's go, when are we going to get another? I mean, the satisfaction might be very brief. So I just don't think you should obsess about championships. I tell you what, the most fun I've ever had being around a sports team, I would say that the two things that stood out most to me since I've been in Minnesota about being around a sports team were, number one, when the Twins turned it around in like 2001, 2002, that was the most fun I've ever seen. Unexpected success, great personalities, overachieving. That, to me, was as entertaining as it gets. And the other one was, 2009. And, of course, that's where Viking fans are going to throw up their hands and say, yeah, but, Favre throws the interception and they'll lose and all that. But it was still an amazingly entertaining season.
Oh, and as a writer,
neither of those things ended in championships, but to me, those were as fascinating as sports gets.
Well, and it's almost like comedians. It's almost like comedians when a new president is elected. They've got brand new material to be able to,
exactly
to go with, and I think that's what happened with the Favre area. There was constantly something to write about. Just so very quickly on the Minnesota sports topic, your Minnesota Gophers actually closed out a game against lowly Nebraska, but I was so pleased with that they actually won by 18.
Well, actually, it's good for them. They won their third Big Ten game, and now they're only one game behind Nebraska, and they're edging toward the middle of the pack, which might give them some hope of some kind of a postseason bid. I actually would be, not that you would set it up for this to happen. You'd rather win by 18 every time if you can, and they're playing better. But I think the key for this team is going to be to win a couple close games.
I agree, totally.
And
agree.
Maybe win a close game on the road. I think that will break the ice. Because I still think, if you look around the Big Ten, the Gophers have plenty of talent to be a 500 or better team in this league. Now, I'm not saying they'll do it at this point. I'm saying they should have. You have two senior guards that both started playing better. Bo Walker is among the better big men in the league. You have some quality depth. You have a couple really athletic guys in Mason and Morris who can make plays. This team should not be, whatever it is, 3-6. This team should be 500 or better, and they're starting to play like it now. Now, it might be too late, but there's no reason this team can't. I mean, this league is not that tough this year. Ohio State has the great freshman in Russell. Michigan State's always tough. Wisconsin's very, very good. Other than that, all these games are winnable.
Oh, they absolutely are. I mean, I think they could make a run. I'm not saying they have a chance at making the tournament, but I think they could make a run. They certainly had a tough start to the season, the Big Ten season, and so we'll see how it shakes out with them. So, what do you expect out of the game today?
I'm really fascinated by this one, and I'm not always fascinated by Super Bowl weeks or Super Bowl games. You're always interested. You're always interested in figuring who might win, what the X's and O's might look like, what strategies might be employed. But to me, this is one of the most fascinating Super Bowls of all time. Not only has it been a fascinating run-up to the week with all kinds of weird storylines, and the Deflatriots and Belichick and Brady, but I got to be honest, I'm fascinated by Belichick. I'm fascinated by the strategical aspects he brings to the game and what he might come up with in a 2-week period. And, as Art Thiel's going to tell us later in the show, Pete Carroll has an incredible record when he has 2 weeks or more to prepare for a game, both in college and pro. So I think it's two great coaches, and I don't use the word great lightly. I think it's two great coaches. Belichick has a chance to win his fourth Super Bowl. Pete Carroll has a chance to become the first coach ever to win 2 national championships in college and 2 Super Bowls. You have Brady, who has a chance to win his fourth Super Bowl, and he might have a profile soon that will give people reason to say he's the greatest quarterback of all time. A year after we were having that debate about Peyton Manning, and Russell Wilson has a chance to become the first quarterback ever to win 2 Super Bowls in his first 3 seasons. I mean, this is all historic stuff. And let's face it, no matter how interested we are in any other position, coaches and quarterbacks always dominate the conversation. So you have that going, and then you have 2 franchises that go about things completely different. About the only similarity between the 2 franchises is that Belichick and Carroll even though are kind of take the lead with personnel, and that just doesn't happen a lot of places. They both take the lead. They have people they really trust to do all the legwork, but they kind of take the lead as far as making the decisions. John Schneider, the St. Thomas grad, is the general manager for Seattle, and he does a great job, but I still think Pete is the loudest voice in the room. But in terms of matchups, you have the great Seattle defense that might not be getting the ideal matchup. These are not very good against tight ends, and Rob Gronkowski, when healthy, is the best tight end in the league. Might end up being the greatest tight end of all time. I mean, he is phenomenal, and that they just don't cover tight ends very well. And they have excellent cornerbacks, but the Patriots will probably do something weird with their routes and maybe throw underneath to try to. What you don't want to do is let the ball hang in the air against that team. And I'm not sure the Patriots are even going to throw many of those passes to their wideouts. And then flip it around, you have the Seahawks who want to run the ball to read option up against guys like Ninkovich and Jones who are incredibly athletic and agile, have great lateral movement, might be able to limit Wilson's ability to run. And you have, mediocre to average Seattle receivers going up against Darrelle Revis. So I think both teams, having had 2 weeks to prepare, are going to find some really funky things to do with their game plans. And let's be honest, we don't know what those are going to be until we watch the game.
And let's talk a little bit about the former Vikings and the Minnesota influence, including the fact that T-Jack might have his second Super Bowl ring.
Amazing. Hey, Brad Childress always said he was a winner.
He's a winner, and that's the way to do it, by the way. Just ride on the coattails of your fellow players and go out for the handshake and the coin toss.
That might be the best job in sports.
I think it is.
Being the backup quarterback on a good team with a durable starting quarterback. You get to play football. You get to play football without getting your brains rattled around in your brain pan. You get the checks. You get the postseason checks. You still have your sanity at the end of the day.
And guys like Kevin Williams, who, he's at the end of his career, and he has a shot here as well, although I still think it's going to be the Pats tonight.
Well, it's funny because I was picking I am picking the Patriots because it's just a pick. There's no reason to change it midstream after you've already put it out there. But I was picking the Patriots until I talked to our buddy Art Thiel, and he kind of gave me like 18 reasons to pick the Seahawks. And he's not a homer. He's somebody who would tell you if you thought the Patriots were going to win. So I'm sticking with my Patriots pick. I just have a feeling that, I think I said this the other day, I think Seattle is the better team, has more good players, but I just think Patriots have some matchup advantages here that might turn the game in a very close game.
Should be a pretty good chess match tonight, and that's what the average fan, I think, is hoping for a good game. And you're always hoping that these two teams play their best game. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, you get nerves at the first quarter typically and that sort of thing. But I'd love to see these two teams play their best game against each other, and I think it could be a great match at that point. So let's should we go into your interview here with Art, and then maybe we'll wrap it up with you being at O'Gara's and your first real performance with the full band.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So let's get to Art, and then we'll wrap it up with kind of setting up the week, setting up the game day and setting up the week here.
Okay, here's your interview with Art.
Art, I appreciate you taking the time today. You're with Sports Press Northwest. You're actually a creator of co-founder of Sports Press Northwest. A long-time great columnist in the Pacific Northwest, now doing your own thing. Before we get to talking about the Seahawks, tell me about what it is like to go through having your paper die and having to start up your own thing. Because, I'm spoiled. I'm lucky my paper has at least survived to date.
Right. Well, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer died in 2009, and it was obviously at the bottom of the recession as well. So starting up a business at that time was difficult, and it remains difficult to sustain it. But my co-founder, Steve Rudman, and I decided that we would want to try this because we felt like there was still a need for quality journalism, and that was kind of in a Badlands time when all sorts of stuff was popping up. I think it's better now. I think the online digital world is a lot more responsible than it used to be, but it's still kind of a Wild West thing, and we're still finding our way. But we've had over 5 million uniques in our 4 years in the business, so we've got increased revenues and increased traffic. It still, needs to make more money to make a better living. But we've had a lot of positive feedback, reader donations. We've had advertising. We get occasional things like books come our way. We have published a book on Russell Wilson in September, and that's doing quite well on Amazon. It was a top 20 football book for a couple of months, and it's still there, and it might actually sell one or two more copies should Russell Wilson have some success on Sunday.
I would think so. What and title of the book?
The book is Russell Wilson, Standing Tall, and it's on Amazon, and our company has been talked. We've had a number of other opportunities to come our way, and we're still considering what we should do on the book front, because we are a 7-day-a-week publication. That means that's a lot of work for the founders, and we don't have a lot of money to throw at freelancers, but we have a number of them, and so we want to keep this going. Our emphasis is to be authoritative, to be independent, and to be able to be honest with readership, because what's happening now is that the leagues are taking over a lot of media responsibilities. They're connecting with their fans directly, which I understand, but I have a hunch that those fans some of them at least, don't understand that they're getting stuff straight from the league, sanitized and pasteurized and homogenized for their reading pleasure. So it's been a big thing for us to try to be independent. Even some of the other supposedly independent websites have broadcast affiliations.
Yes,
ESPN.
League partner is a very it's a very devious phrase, meaning that you might be under somebody's thumb.
Yeah, and that's really what is troubling to me about the state of sports journalism. Is there are so many broadcast partnerships with news sources that the independence is compromised, and we've seen ESPN run into all sorts of conflicts and controversies over time.
Only daily.
Yeah, and so that that bothers me, and I think independent journalism has still got a way forward. The path is not smooth, nor is it entirely clear, but it works.
Yeah. Well, let's get to Russell Wilson, because I think this is a great matchup. I don't always think the Super Bowl is going to be a great game. I don't always enjoy Super Bowl week, but I do find this one fascinating. And I think of all the fascinating aspects, maybe the most fascinating is Russell Wilson. I did a piece on Russell, and I've had this argument consistently with other people in my business ever since he was at Wisconsin. I always feel like I've had a higher opinion of Russell Wilson than anybody I ever talked to, and that's continuing. And I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and he was like, Russell Wilson's a game manager. And I'm like, no. And so this week, I looked, Tom Brady has a chance, if he wins this game, to at least make a claim that he's the greatest quarterback of all time. I don't know if he is or not, but he has a chance to make that claim if he wins this game. First 3 years of their careers, Russell Wilson, higher completion percentage, more yards through the air, way more yards if you include ground totals, more touchdowns, fewer interceptions, and chance to be the first guy ever to win 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. He's not a game manager. He is a great young quarterback in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't argue with you, because I've been watching him up close for all 3 years, and that was a part of what we wrote about in the book, was that Russell had demonstrated this capacity for not managing a game, but running it, driving it in high school and in 2 colleges. John Schneider, the general manager of the Seahawks, saw all of that. He bird-dogged him through the Big Ten season.
St. Thomas, Minnesota, St. Thomas from St. Paul, Minnesota, John Schneider, by
That's
the way.
True, and he was also a Green Bay executive for a while. So he has a lot of affiliation with Wisconsin sports. So he was there, he understood it, he got other scouts who he trusted to confirm everything he saw. So he was very excited when the chance came to sell Pete Carroll, and Pete bought off very quickly. So, and everything that Schneider has anticipated has come true, and probably beyond that. I mean, I don't think he expected a Super Bowl in Russell's second year.
Right.
And so they've been validated by the fact that he has got that extraordinary poise, maturity, and I call it intellectual sophistication in terms of being able to diagnose a defense, diagnose his offense, and come up with the checks at the line to make the right plays. And I think the last 5 minutes in overtime of the Green Bay NFC Championship game, where they came from just slightly south of infinity all the way back to win that game. And that was one of the most astonishing outcomes. It wasn't a great game, but the outcome was just unbelievable. And it had to do with Russell. He, in overtime, hit back-to-back 35-yard passes to win the game. As soon as they won the coin flip, I said, I've seen enough to know it over.
Yeah. And that's another great statistical parallel. Tom Brady is seen as the prototypical pocket passer, big, tall guy, big, strong arm, gets the ball downfield, and that's all true. There's no reason to try to diminish anything Tom Brady's done, but Russell Wilson, again, first 3 years of career, many more plays of 20 yards and more, many more plays of 40 yards or more. It's not even close. Russell Wilson makes big plays, obviously throwing it, but also when he runs, he tends to run for quite a bit of yardage. And on top of all that, and this is another fascinating aspect of Russell, I think, of all the so-called running or mobile quarterbacks who've come in the league the last 5 years, and this looked like it might be a trend. He's not only the best runner among them, he's the best at not getting hit when he runs.
Yeah, and that is something that he was instructed by Pete Carroll. He said, look, I'm going to let you run. If you get hit, you're not going to run anymore. We're not going to do it. And I mean, Russell is he's a fairly bright guy, and he understands his size against a 280-pound D lineman or a 250-pound linebacker is not going to work. And so he does do what Robert Griffin III didn't do, what Jake Locker didn't do, and with other big, strong quarterbacks didn't do. He didn't go macho in the final yard. And all of those guys, you watch them. When they want to get that final yard, they do the noble, great American thing and throw everything at it. And that's why these guys have been diminished in their play. You cannot do that in the NFL. And so Russell understood that very well. But the other thing you were touching on is so true. We just did a little calculation on sportspressnw.com about using Brian Billick's
explosives.
And explosives. And so when you calculate the number of positive explosive plays and turnovers created minus the opponent's explosive plays and turnovers created, the Seahawks have, and this is a point scale, we can't go into all the details now, but you can look it up on our site. The Seahawks had 76 points in the point scale of this thing. The Patriots were at 0.
Wow.
And that is a primary function of Wilson's ability to break runs for more than 10 yards and throw explosive passes for more than 25.
Yep.
So, your point is validated by the fact that the Seahawks have had more explosive plays than any other offense, and the defense gets almost as many turnovers as any other. So it adds up to a way that you can get to 43-8 in the previous Super Bowl, and there is that potential in this game. I know a lot of New England fans won't believe it, and a lot of bettors won't believe it, but I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think the Seahawks are going to win, but I also think that people don't understand how successful the Seahawks have been in the big play business.
Right. I first met Pete Carroll, I think, 91 or something. He was the Jets defensive coordinator. I covered a game in New York. I stayed over and did a piece on him, spent some time in his office. I can't pretend I know him well, but I've always kept track of him. He loves Bud Grant, so there's that connection.
Yes,
and, we have some mutual acquaintances. The easy national perception is tons of enthusiasm, bright guy, close with his players. Is that all just simply the truth, or is there a little more shading there?
Well, I think it's all true, but I think the easy, lazy buzz phrase is to call Pete rah-rah.
Right.
It's just so meaningless and so empty of value. Pete is a very shrewd guy when it comes to human relationships. And he understands, especially with young people today, how to push buttons better than anybody I've ever seen. And he does it with not out of fear and intimidation like Bill Belichick did, or both of their predecessors in New England, because he learned from Bill Parcells. But the thing that Pete does is he tries to understand what issues young men have in terms of reaching their potential. What is impeding them from getting to the top? And he does that with conversation as well as, eyewitness to their feats in practice. And he really has a great grasp on the buttons to push because he makes an effort to learn about who these guys are. And he has an agenda also to make them succeed at life. And, it's easy to say that. All coaches probably give lip service to it. But Pete really does that, and it helps because that that triggers the buy-in for his football demands, because he will demand, and Pete has an edge. If you deliberately disobey, or you like to be a provocateur and break rules, Pete will come down on you. It's not casual at all. But what he does, he makes, and I think all of us probably have had a professor or a parent or a sibling or somebody important in our lives who was such a good mentor that you didn't want to disappoint them. If you made a mistake, it was not that you made a mistake, is that you let down this very valuable person. And I think that's what happens with the Seahawks. Most of the time, when they screw up, they're letting Pete down, or at least that's how they think, and they don't want to do that because in many cases, he's the best father figure, mentor, coach these guys have ever had. And I just had a conversation with Landon Cohen, who is a defensive lineman that you probably never heard of.
I haven't.
But he is an 8-year veteran who's only played in 40 games. He was a 7th-round draft choice in Detroit. The Seahawks hired him after the regular season, and he was part of the goal line stands in the Green Bay game.
Oh,
they
wow.
kept the Packers out of the end zone and forced them into field goals. Landon Cohen was parking cars in Spartanburg, South Carolina for the entirety of 2014.
Wow.
He was cut in the preseason by, I think, Buffalo, and he didn't have a job except for his own budding business. He wasn't just a car parker, but he was owning this business. And he told this great story about parking cars until the phone rang. And he's suddenly in the NFC Championship game stopping Aaron Rodgers. and he said that in talking to Pete or listening to him in meetings, he's taking notes because he says, what Pete says is so valuable and so important. I'm taking it back to my guys in the parking business in Spartanburg and telling them this is how this is valuable. Listen to this. Pete loves to show funny videos during team meetings, and and Landon Cohen has taken all this down. He's writing all this because he understands this is more than football. This is life lessons, and Pete has a mastery of this like almost no coach I've ever run into.
Yeah. The coolest story I think I've ever heard about Pete was, I think, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from the LA Times did a series on Pete Carroll, and how he would go into the nastiest neighborhoods in LA and recruit guys, and did it fearlessly. And he's talking to the journalist one day, and the journalist is like, well, can I ever go on one of these trips with you? And Pete said, well, let's go right now. There's a guy I want to talk to, let's go right now. But you got to change your shirt. And the guy goes, change my shirt? He said, oh, yeah, they'll shoot you if you wear that color for where we're going. Yeah, absolutely. But that's so classic Pete, just fearless and enthusiastic.
And he has done that for years, and he's a mythic figure in L.A. and Compton, in the toughest parts of the inner city in L.A. because he would do that. And there's he is so adored by those people that there is, if any harm came to Pete, Compton would explode.
Yeah.
Just because he's provided so many opportunities for young people with USC scholarships, and then he founded a foundation, A Better LA, and he's created a similar one in Seattle. And he really, I think, wins over not only the young person, but he wins over parents because they can understand here's a guy they can trust their child to, and especially parents who are impoverished, who often are single parents, who don't really have a mechanism for advancing their kid. All they can do is feed and clothe and love them. But to instruct them or to guide them or to help them make life decisions, these parents are often stuck. And so Pete has been so valued there that there was a major heartbreak when he decided to leave USC for Seattle.
Two more topics, then I'll let you back to work. I know you have a lot more to do. I'm going to hit you with two more Minnesota-type angles here. Percy Harvin, it's obvious why they had to move him. But to your knowledge, was there an incident that sparked that, or was it more just the way the team was functioning?
Well, there were apparently two incidents. There, on basically a year ago, almost to the day, Percy Harvin and Golden Tate had a confrontation on the Saturday before the Sunday Super Bowl in New York, and the Seahawks amazingly kept quiet. Allegedly, blows were exchanged. Tate more recently has said no, it was a confrontation, but it wasn't punches. Whatever happened, that was the beginning of the end, I think, although I'm sure there were episodes before. And then in late August, the Seahawks had their final preseason game was in Oakland, and in the practice leading up to that, there was another altercation, a fight between Harvin and Doug Baldwin. And Percy didn't play in that game because he had, quote-unquote, personal matters to attend to. And we didn't know, and the Seahawks still won't confirm it, but we think that was an informal suspension. They didn't want to make a big announcement about it, so they just kept him out of the game. And then there were two episodes as far as I know, two episodes of insubordination where he would not return to the game in the fourth quarter when asked. And I think one was against Dallas, a game they lost, and another one was against Denver, in which they won. But as far as I can tell, again, third hand, and no one is wanting to be on the record about this, he was furious with either the play calling or the play execution.
This sounds really familiar.
Yeah, I understand that folks in Minnesota would have say, this is a familiar note. and so he became toxic. And I've heard from a number of people that the expression was Percy can go from 0 to 100 emotionally. We're not talking miles an hour. We're talking emotions. And that abrupt habit, character trait, it was really hard to manage. And, and when Pete Carroll says it isn't working, it isn't working.
Right.
And so it was a shock. There was no one who anticipated this because they had rejiggered a lot of their offense to accommodate the jet sweeps and getting Percy open, getting Percy the ball in open space.
Right.
And that wound up screwing up the offense. Not totally. It certainly wasn't all Percy's fault, but they went out of their way to accommodate, and defenses game plan for it. They said, okay, here's options. When he goes in this fly sweep, here's what we do, A, B, C. And they throttled it, largely. You got away with a few, but there was accumulation of on-field and off-field problems that caused Pete to say, you know what, we don't care what we invested in him, we don't care what we gave Minnesota, we don't care how this is going to look, we don't care what the national controversy is. We have a sunk cost. We have to eliminate it. We have to move on.
Yeah. Last figure I want to talk about, Darrell Bevell. I've always liked Darrell. I've always thought he was really good at his job. I thought it was remarkable the work he did with Brett Favre at the end of Brett Favre's career, and Favre played better that year than ever before, more efficiently. And now he's obviously done very well with Russell Wilson, the passing game with the Seahawks. You think he gets a head coaching job here pretty soon, or is he not quite the right personality to win over an owner?
Well, the latter could be true. The other thing is that the Seahawks offense is always talked about second,
right,
with the defense, and Russell is such an extraordinary individual athlete and talent. I mean, I joke. Russell was born 35 years old.
Yeah,
and so to me, Darrell probably isn't going to get as much credit as a coordinator who would perhaps win two Super Bowls in a row. And, I think he's a very bright guy. I could see where a coach might say that his personality is perhaps too genial, perhaps too accommodating. Is he authoritarian enough to run the show? I'm sure that people would say something like that about Carroll, but, away from the microphones and away from the cameras, Pete can be very stern. And, so I haven't never seen Darrell Bevell in a head coaching position. I can't know exactly how it's going to work.
Right.
But I could see there might be an asterisk next to his candidacy simply because he doesn't have that. There's a certain edge, a certain dynamism that has to be part of a head coach, and it doesn't have to always be alike, and it doesn't have to be flamboyant or dramatic, but you've got to be able to pick up on that. He's gotten interviews,
Yep.
but he's hurt, like all Super Bowl assistant coaches are hurt, by the length of the season and the urgency for teams to want to make a decision on a new coach and get going. But it looks like his counterpart on defense, Dan Quinn, is going to be the head coach in Atlanta as soon as Monday afternoon. So, but and Daryl, and that would be the last available job, I think.
Yep.
So, Daryl will probably be a head coach someday, but I think he's got to earn a few more chops.
Right. The website again?
SportsPressNW.com.
Great. And the book is Russell Wilson Standing Tall, available on Amazon.
Yes.
Final thought on the game or the week or whatever comes into your brain?
Well, I suppose the high drama is Sunday, and I think what we're going to discover there is that Pete Carroll, again, will have created a strategic edge. His record, when he has extra time to prepare, like bowl games in college or first game of the season, as well as his pro record, is something like 20-1 in games when he's got extra time to prepare. I expect that he will have a strategy that's going to give him a slight edge on Bill Belichick, and I think Russell Wilson is going to have a big game compared to Tom Brady. So the only X factor might be injuries to Richard Sherman or Earl Thomas. They're obviously going to say they're 100%,
right,
but whether they will be is anybody's guess. But I'm looking at Seattle 26, New England 20.
Awesome. All right, I appreciate the time.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
All right, Jim, we're back. How you doing?
I'm good. Art was really good. I don't know where you found that other guy though.
Well, you know what's funny is that I've always had this thing with Pete Carroll where I just didn't like him after everything that happened at USC, and you start to look at him as a cheater and all that stuff. But then you have to go ahead and get a guy that will humanize Pete Carroll and talk about his foundation and all the great work he does in Compton and with, single mothers and everything else. And it's like suddenly I'm like, okay, the guy's just a human being just like the rest of us, right?
And Vikings people have always loved him. He came,
Yeah.
There were a lot of people in the Vikings organization who really wanted him to be hired instead of Denny Green in '92, but it was Roger Hedrick. I think it'd be with the league office kind of pushing him toward Denny Green. There just weren't many black head coaches in the NFL at that time. I didn't think the NFL office wanted to see the Vikings pick the white guy in a close race with a black guy because there weren't enough black NFL head coaches, and Denny was a promising candidate, and he ended up winning a lot of games. So it certainly wasn't the wrong pick, but there were a lot of people who really wanted Pete to get that job. And as far as cheating, I think I will say almost is my qualifier. Almost every major college winning football program cheats in some way. I think the difference with Pete and USC is you're dealing with so many impoverished neighborhoods. You're dealing with so many underprivileged kids. It's almost impossible not to cheat. It's almost impossible not to find a way to help somebody financially who's in dire straits the way they are. So it's a little different than like giving a kid from Eden Prairie a bunch of extra money. Eden Prairie might not be a good example anymore. Edina. It's one thing to bribe the kid from Edina. It's another thing to find a way to sneak a little money to a guy that can't eat.
Well, that's exactly what Art did there. It really showed that it's not about the Edina kid. It's about the kid that's from Compton or wherever else. And hey, if we got to bend the rules a little bit to make sure this kid gets out of poverty and gives his whole family an opportunity, let's go ahead and do it. So,
right.
Great. Art is very interesting. I'd love to have him on as a guest again sometime. Let's talk about what's coming up this week.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a bunch of quick hitters here to wrap up the show, and then let's set up the rest of the week for ourselves. First of all, two key, other than Pete, two key former Vikings to watch today. Kevin Williams, the Patriots will probably try. It's very hard to run wide on Seattle because they're so fast. If the Patriots are going to run the ball, and you never know what they're going to do, but if they're going to try to run the ball, it's probably going to be right up the middle, right at Kevin Williams. How Kevin Williams holds up today could determine whether he gets a Super Bowl ring or not. The other key former Viking figure, Darrell Bevell, has done great work with Russell Wilson and with this offense, and knowing that Belichick is going to find an antidote to the way they run the read option. It'll be fascinating to see how Bevell reacts. This is Bevell versus Belichick in a lot of ways, which will be really interesting. The Georgia Dome, Atlanta Falcons are now being accused, this is a report from Adam Schefter of ESPN, Atlanta Falcons are being accused of pumping in artificial noise into the Georgia Dome. I've been in the Georgia Dome. Even with artificial noise, it's not very loud. That's kind of that's a very weird story. But the Vikings used to pump a little extra noise in there. The Twins were always accused of opening doors and shutting doors at strategic times. I love it when teams play around with stuff like that. Bill Belichick. Art mentioned the great stat. Pete Carroll is 20-1 in his coaching career when he has more than 1 week to prepare for an opponent, which is great. Bill Belichick is 10-0 in the playoffs when he faces a team in the postseason that his team hasn't faced previously, which is the case today. So there are a lot of great statistical trends in favor of both teams. How about this one? Patriots have won 14 of the 18 coin flips this year.
Wow. That's
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah, that
for a team
defies
that's
the
accused
odds.
of cheating, you wonder. With the Patriots, you just always wonder. You always wonder. It's bizarre. One really interesting perspective on this game. I've been thinking about this all week. There was a time, early to midway through this season, when people were actually questioning whether Tom Brady should be benched and whether Marshawn Lynch had any chance of re-signing with the Seahawks. Think about that. And now Brady reacted to that one terrible game in Kansas City by having a typically great season, and now he's got a chance to win a fourth Super Bowl. And Marshawn Lynch now, according to reports, is being offered a monster contract extension because they value him that much. Everybody's, for years, people have been saying, okay, running backs wear out. They're going to go to Robert Turbin, they're going to Christine Michael, and replace Marshawn Lynch. It sounds like they are trying to lock this guy up long term. 2 more points. One is if you're in Phoenix, you realize that Seattle fans outnumber New England fans maybe 3 or 4 to 1. It's going to feel like a home game for Seattle today. And my last one, the last strategical matchup type thing to watch, how the Seahawks cover Rob Gronkowski. What they might do is put Cam Chancellor, who's a big, strong, incredible athlete, on Gronkowski. And if you do, you're going to see 2 of the best athletes in the NFL going at it in a key matchup. That's my stuff. And now for the week. Wednesday night at Kieran's, Roy Smalley will be my guest. We'll start, we'll put a cap on the NFL, and we'll start looking forward to spring training and the Twins and baseball in general. 5 o'clock at Kieran's on Wednesday with Roy Smalley, and then Friday, 5 p.m. at O'Gara's. Michael Russo, our hockey writer at the Star Tribune, and one of my partners on the podcast will be live 5 to 6 at O'Gara's. And then that will lead into my band. I think we're still called the Media Jackals. We need to figure out what our name's going to be going forward, playing something like 7:30 to 9-ish, and leading into live band karaoke in the Shanty, which used to be called the Garage over O'Gara's. And the live band karaoke has been a hoot. It's been great. And we're going to, my band's a cover band. We're going to get up there and play a lot of our favorite music and kind of lead into the live karaoke. And I'm sure we're going to do another podcast someplace else, too.
Well, make something happen. Well, thanks so much for your report from Phoenix. I hope you get a chance to spin over to my favorite pizza place of all time, Nello's Pizza. Probably get one near the campus there at ASU, so check it out.
I'll find a way to do that, maybe for lunch tomorrow before I get on the plane.
That's a great thought there in closing. So this has been SOUHAN Unfiltered on the Alive and Social Network. Sean Bernard at the Southside Studios. Jim, have a safe flight home, and we look forward to seeing you Wednesday.
Great. Thanks, Sean.